Hi, this is QTV, and I am Babu Karsi, welcoming you to another edition of the Viewpoint. On this special edition, we are looking into Gambia at 54. On the 18th of February 1965, the Gambia became an independent nation. Now, on the 18th of February 2019, the Gambia will be 54 years old. Joining me on this special edition is Mr. Hasum Sise, of course, a historian, a writer, one-time curator at the Gambia National Museum, now working with the National Center for Arts and Culture. Mr. Sise, welcome to the Viewpoint.
Thank you very much, Babukar. It's my pleasure to join you this evening.
Before going into Gambia with independence, first, tell us a bit about Hasum Sise as one of the finest historians the Gambia can boast of right now.
Oh, well, thank you very much for the compliment. You rightly said I work at the National Center for Arts and Culture, and really we've been very busy in these past few days, trying to give support to people like you who want to, reinvigorate the interests of Gambians in this aspect of our history. What we do at the NCAC is partly meant to be this, to promote, and support history, culture, and heritage, such that even some of the pictures that you will be seeing, the audience will be seeing, later in this program, come from the museum, because we have, hundreds of historic, photographs, depicting various, episodes, of Gambian history. So really, this is part of our work, or at least this is meant to be part of our work, that is to help to sensitize Gambians on our culture and history. So therefore, I am very much happy to be here.
Why did you choose history? From the Gambia, you left to the Forever College in Sierra Leone, then to Canada. Why history?
Well, yes, it has been a passion for a very long time, particularly at Armitage, where I attended, in the early 80s. Just had some, very good history teachers. Because sometimes having a good teacher, there was this, guy from Sierra Leone, Mr. Mbayo, who had a particular, liking for me, and really promoted, me in every aspect during my high school days. There was also this Sierra Leonean, teacher, Mr. Koroma, and in my later years at Armitage, the principal at the time himself, Mr. Musa Sani, also, mentored me. So basically, I think it all started having, good teachers at high school, good history teachers at high school. Then the influence, grew as I, went into, other, aspects, of, education.
Since you came into this trade of, history, the recollections, how easy or hard was it for, a Gambian historian trying to recollect things, knowing that hardly we keep data compared to other countries, getting the information, most of the things that had happened, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, getting them back, it was very difficult. How easy or hard was it for you?
Oh, well, yeah, working in a museum, you are really immersed into Gambian history. That is our milieu, that's our ambience, if you like, our context. It's all about history, culture, and heritage, you see. So we have, you have access to all kinds of documents, all kinds of, photographs, maps, dating to the 1700s, to the 1800s, you see. Of course, in addition to the museum display. So you just, you are inside, history. Working in the museum, and that in itself can be, quite inspiring. Well, of course, the work we do in the museum is, much more than history. There's archaeology also. There's a bit of anthropology, and of course, museology itself. In the exhibitions, how you exhibit, how you attract visitors, and so on and so forth. You see, but basically, one rewarding thing about museum work is that you find yourself within the context, of history. the documents are around you, the photographs, the maps, the objects. Yes.
The Gambia will be 54 years old on the 18th of February 2019. Let's start with your recollection of pre-independence before 1965.
Well, in history we usually have this thing called periodization, because it's usually the scope is too big. And if you say history, like it can be from antiquity to now. The whole sweep of 8 million, 10 million years. But to make it manageable, we usually periodize. So I think what you are referring to is like pre-colonial.
Pre-colonial.
Maybe
yes,
we should start from pre-colonial.
Before independence, because all now a viewer like me will be watching you like, okay, we had our independence in 1965. Before that, the British were here, that colonized us. We got our independence in 1965. But there are ways and mechanisms that it came through before 1965.
Well, first we have to, start. We have to, start by saying that Gambian history started long before independence and even colonial rule. Like the stone circles, which, are under our purview. In the National Center for Arts and Culture, on which are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They are more than 1,000 years old, okay, and they are erected by Gambians, okay. So far, what the archaeological research has shown is that they were burial sites, maybe for royalty, okay, and 1,000 years, and more, that is a long time ago, okay. So really, we can say that. As far back as more than 1,000 years ago, there was a highly, developed, civilization in this part of the world called Gambia, because it must have required, real energy and discipline to be able to, cut, those big stones. If you have ever been to Wasu,
yeah.
I'm sure, to cut them, roll them down, and to erect them, as they are standing today. You see, so that tells us that this was a part of the world with a high degree of civilization, at least up to 1,000 years ago. Now, another thing also, to show that, Gambian history, Gambia has a very, very long history, has to do with the accounts of the earliest European explorers and even the Arab explorers. The European explorers, like the Portuguese, who are the first to arrive in this part of the world, the first Europeans to arrive in this part of the world in the 1450s, they wrote very, very interesting accounts of what they saw.
In the Gambia?
Yeah, in 1456, to be more precise. From the time that they passed Bakau, going into the bay, St. Mary's Island, going, upriver, up to Jufure, James Island, and further into the, upper reaches of the river, you see. And really, if you read the description, of these explorers, of these Portuguese explorers, and these descriptions are still intact, in archives in Lisbon, in London, in Paris, which historians, can consult. You will be very proud to be a Gambian, because you see, we had, these strong states, empires, Nyomi, Salum, Kiang, ruled by powerful chiefs, or even kings, sometimes with their own armies, with their own, system of tax collection, with their own, judicial, system, and so on and so forth. You see, producing crops, there was, food self-sufficiency, and so on, and so forth. These are the descriptions of this part of the world, written 700 years ago. Babukar, you see. So really, even before the Europeans arrived, we had a very, very, glorious existence. Okay, if you look at it from, all angles. Yes. The
coming of the Europeans then, and then things started changing. They came, they were interested in things that we have here. Yeah. They explored them. Even before coming to the slave trade, it started somewhere. Taking up our minerals, taking it back until things changes. Then they came with a very full, powerful force to rule us. And yes, the battles and others came in.
Yeah. The coming of the Europeans, also can be periodized. Into 2 or 3 sections. Like 1456, the first European explorers arrived, and they went up to what is today called James Island. Okay, in 2013 the name was changed to Kunta Kinte Island. Okay. Now, what happened? They came, they saw, they went back. And they wrote glowing accounts that there is gold, Gambia has gold, has ivory, has, fertile soil, the river is navigable. Now, the moment these accounts, were broadcast, okay, I mean, all other European countries, the Spanish, the British, the French, all of them, started to, show interest in the Gambia. That is why James Island became like a theater of war, because no European power can control it, for more than 10 years. Because, like another European power will come, will bombard, the island, dismiss you, and occupy it. Because it was a very, very strategic.
The location.
Yeah, controlling trade. Because the River Gambia is the most important, trading route in West Africa, because it's navigable. In the rainy season, up to November, December, you can, go by ship, up to Basse and beyond, sometimes even up to Fatoto, you see. So that was one reason why all the European powers, I'm not talking about the 1500s, wanted to have a share of the Gambia, see. But at first, they came as traders, particularly trading in slaves. Okay, that is why James Island became like the most important slave departure point, like in West Africa. And if you look at the slavery database, figures, you will see that up to 200,000 slaves, left James Island, to go to the New World, between 1450s, to the 1840s. See, so the trade in slaves was the first interest. Now, after the abolition of slavery, the European powers, they did not leave the Gambia. They wanted to partake in what is called the legitimate trade. Now, slavery has been banned, yes, but Gambia has ivory, elephant tusk, there's wax, there is, like tropical wood, and all these, other produces which the Europeans needed, to feed the factories, just emerging out of the Industrial Revolution, you see. So this was now in the 1820s, you see. But as time went on, the French and the British almost fought wars because of who will control trade in the River Gambia. Wow. The French occupied Albreda, okay, and said they will never leave, they will never leave Albreda. In fact, they had a trading station there, which some few years ago, we in the NCC, we rehabilitated, and it's still there, on the bank of the river. But the British did not want the French because they were, competitors, sort of, like in the commerce, you see. So, they almost went to war as to who will, control trade in the River Gambia. Luckily, you have 1885, the Berlin Conference, in which the European powers decided to carve out Africa, okay, so as to prevent war. Each European power was giving you a piece of the cake, if you might
the famous cake,
yeah.
the famous cake.
Yeah. Okay, but the British were wise enough. Even before 1885, they had secured St. Mary's Island, that's Batos. They had secured McCarthy Island, that's Georgetown, and also had secured the Seeded Mile, that's in Barra. See, so these three areas, were outposts, okay, for British traders, and the British insisted that these three places, no other, trader, be it French or Spanish,
will be allowed.
Will be allowed to trade in Batos, to trade in McCarthy Island, that's Georgetown, or to trade in the Seeded Mile. Now the Seeded Mile is just, the area, covering Barra SL. It was 1 mile, from the high water mark, 1 mile deep, okay. And they drew a red line. And they told the king of Barra, don't worry, every year we'll give you some money, but don't allow any trader, to compete us in the Seeded Mile. So even before 1885, the British had, started to establish themselves in the Gambia. And it was in 1885, after the Berlin Conference, that, what is today called Gambia was given to the British as their colony, and what is today Senegal was given to the French as their colony. But the borders, were not drawn until between 1889 to 1893. So really, if you say Gambia, it's just like 130 years old. As far as the boundaries are concerned. Because before that, we had no Gambia, no Senegal.
Yeah.
We had Nyomi, Kiang, Salum, Fonyi, Tumana,
so those names came before Gambia.
Those were states. Those were independent, sovereign states. Okay, Fuladu, Alpha Molo and Musa Molo. So the British, had to come and sign treaties with these chiefs, and these mansas like Musa Molo, or they fought them, like Fodesila, who ran the Islamic State in Combo. He refused, to sign a peace treaty with the British. So in 1893, the British attacked Gunjur, and it was destroyed. Fodesila was arrested, exiled to St. Louis, where he died, in December of 1893. So some of the, our Boers, the Mansas, resisted. Okay.
Of British rule.
Oh yes, particularly after 1889, when they knew that these people, are drawing the borders, which would mean that they want to occupy, our land. Some of them resisted, like for the Kaba, in Kiang and Fonyi, he resisted, but he too was killed in 1900. But some like Musa Molo, maybe they are wise. They said instead of fighting the white man, they agreed to sign a peace treaty, to earn a monthly salary, and were demoted as chiefs.
Wow.
So basically, this was the situation. Up to 1900.
When did Gambians started showing resistance? The British, or the Europeans, I will call it, came, invaded, took slaves, came and said they were going to do a civilized trade, came in and invaded, took most of our resources and our, valuable people, I will call it. When did the Gambians start showing resistance, fighting for independence?
Well, as early as colonial rule, started, like I said, as early as 1889, like Fodesila refused, because he was, running an Islamic state in Combo, with his Qadi courts, with his, system of administration, he was a religious scholar, so the whole of Combo, his capital was in Gunjur, Birkama, Busumbala, Mandwar, Sanyang, Sabiji. All these were, strong Islamic centers.
But I'm talking about the Gambians that.
Well, yes. I'm just giving an example that there was resistance from day one. And maybe this is an important historical lesson, to the youths of today.
Oh, yes.
That really our forefathers never accepted colonial rule. Lying down. Yeah. Even Musa Molo, he resisted. Okay, he was captured and exiled to Sierra Leone. And he was, left to, rot in Sierra Leone until 1924, when he fell sick and he was allowed to come back, to live in Keserkunda, where he died in 1931. Now, for the Kaba, he ruled Kiang, and part of the Fonyi.
Fonyi, yeah.
Yeah, you see. But he also, he resisted. But in 1900, I'm sure you have had the, famous, Sankandi incident.
Sankandi incident.
The British attacked him and they killed him. So that was the end of resistance. But it happened at the first stage. Now from 1900 really up to the 1920s, there was a period of quietude in the Gambia.
Okay.
Because now the British, have divided the country into colony and protectorate. Colony is Batos and Kombo Tuba Banco. Now the protectorate is anything from Bara to Koina, or anything from Abuko to Koina. Okay, and this protectorate, the British said, should be left in the hands of the chiefs. Okay, whilst for Batos and for Bakau and Serekunda, they were directly under the rule of the governor in Batos. That's why it was called the colony. Okay, but for the rest of the country, the British, were hardly seen. Everything was left in the hands of the chiefs. So what they did was they divided the country into 36, districts.
36.
Yeah, basically, like slicing up, the former kingdoms. Like Foladu of Musa Molo, they cut into upper and lower. Like, Salum, of Gedel Mbochi, they cut into upper and lower. And, so that's how they managed to, gerrymander, the country into 36 districts. And they appointed chiefs and gave them powers in Babukar.
The
British were wise. They did not want to spend money to rule us. So they said, let us rule them through their existing institutions. See, that is why they did not destroy some institutions. You see, like this Mansaya. I mean, they just demoted them. They told Musa Molo, you can no longer be like the Mansa, of Fuladu, because there's only one Mansa in England, and he's your boss. So now you are demoted to a chief. You see, the Sonkos in Bara, in Nyomi, who are the the Mansas. Maranto Sonko, the last Mansa, he was demoted and told that you can no longer call yourself Mansa. Now we call you chief, of Lower Nyomi. You see, that was how they managed to make sure that the institution of administration which our forefathers had developed was not thoroughly destroyed, so that they will be able to rule us through this invented institution of chieftaincy. And Babakar, it worked for them.
It definitely worked.
Yeah.
When those the famous names of P.S. Njais, the Edward Francis Smalls, the Gabo Jahomba came to play to fight for real independence before Sada or Kairabaja?
Well, Small really is the father of our independence.
Edward Francis Smalls.
Yes. Although I must say en passant that the struggle for independence was a collective effort. Yeah. It was more like a relay race.
A relay race?
Yeah.
Relay.
Somebody will start, it will collapse, and another will, pick it up, and then, run. Salauda was quite lucky to have finished the race successfully.
Yeah, that's when
and delivered independence to us on 18 February 1965. But Small, he was born in 1890, like an Aku. Okay, in those days, because one thing about colonial rule also was really it stratified our society. Already our society had been stratified, through the caste system.
Caste system, yes.
The blacksmiths, the goldsmiths, the slaves, the freeborns, and so on. But what the colonial rulers did was to further, stratify our society to become, sort of hierarchical, such that on top of the hierarchy, you had the British officials, the governor in Government House, the traveling commissioner North Bank, traveling commissioner South Bank. But because only two Europeans, were ruling the whole country. Two. Can you imagine?
Two British.
Two whites.
Interesting.
Running the entire Gambia. Why? Because they had the support of the chiefs. So basically, they were just sleeping.
And we are staying at most strategic positions, which is Bakau, Banjul, and
yeah. But the chiefs were doing all the work. The chiefs will collect tax. They will administer justice. They will maintain law and order. They will clear the roads and so on. You see. So Small. Like I said, at top of the pyramid, you are the British officials. Now the Aku were next, in terms of the hierarchy. Because, they are descendants of liberated Africans. They arrived in the 1830s, and then, some of them had been exposed to aspects of westernization. So really, the British, favored them, encouraged them to go to school, and they became sort of the new elite. After the British, you had the Akus, because they were educated. And Small came from that group, and of course he came from a quite a prominent family, because the Mahonis were his uncles also. But he went to school in Sierra Leone, because then we had no school in Patros. You could only stop at standard 7. To go beyond standard 7, you had to go to Sierra Leone, and only the Akus had money to do so, because they were the only people earning salaries as clerks. The first lawyers, we are all Aku, the first, medical doctors and so on. People like Dr. Richards, Dr. Jones. So Small went to Sierra Leone, studied, and came back. And really, he lit the fire of independence. How did he do it? 3 ways. One, he organized the first labor union in the Gambia, and organized the first successful strike in Black Africa. That's the dock worker strike at the ports in Banjul, in Batos, in 1929.
The first strike?
The first strike in the whole of Black Africa was organized by our Gambian hero, Edward Francis Small. He mobilized the Manjago shipwrights and told them, today is 10 December 1929. We are in the height of the groundnuts, buying season. Stop going to work so that the white man will increase your wages. Simple message. He told them. And they went on strike for 6 weeks. The economy almost collapsed. Okay? The British brought soldiers from Sierra Leone, threatening the Manjago strikers, but they wouldn't budge because Small was giving them spiritual and moral support. In the end, Governor Armitage had to call Small for a discussion. So they negotiated and they got a pay rise. That made Small into a hero not only in the Gambia but outside the Gambia. Number two, he was a journalist. He, from his own pocket, he established a newspaper called the Gambia Outlook and Senegambia Reporter. Here was a man, in 1922, when he created this newspaper, he realized there was no newspaper in the whole of Gambia. So he founded the newspaper. But the government prevented him from printing it in the Gambia because there was only one printing house, that's government printing. So Small will go to Senegal, like to Rufisque in Senegal, print, and will bring the newspaper to sell. So he was a true Senegambian. He did not see the border, as some of us do. For him, Gambia and Senegal was just one cultural, political, and economic space. And I think that is also one lesson for all of us. I mean, the two countries, are brothers. We share so much in common that we should always try to promote good neighborliness. Now that newspaper became a thorn in the flesh of the colonial government because Small's journalism was nationalist journalism. He will expose the shortcomings of the colonial rulers. He will educate the farmers. He will educate the nurses, the clerks, and tell them the kind of oppression that they are going through will only end if the British go. Now, number three.
And but no wonder that was why he was sent on exile.
Oh yes, yes. I mean, for 3 years, he spent 2 years in exile, in Dakar, and 1 year in London. But even that, later he came back, and dared the colonial machinery, and continued to edit his newspaper. You see. And number three, Small also mentored a new generation of politicians because he knew, this was a struggle.
Yeah, he couldn't do it alone.
Yeah. So really, you must have like a reserve force. So people like Gaba Jompa, were his students. He trained them and mentored them. You see, so that even when he died in 1959, already the flame he had lit was already
ablaze.
It was already ablaze. Yeah. Now, you mentioned P.S. Njai. He too, studied law, and in 1949 he graduated. Okay, from London, and whilst in London, he met all these nationalists like Kwame Nkrumah, then Nkrumah, Hastings Banda of Malawi, Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, the Trinidadian, Pan-Africanist, George Patmore, and so on and so forth. He met all these nationalists in London, because London was really, the den, if you like, of nationalism, because all the students, were there, all the African students. So there was a lot of ideas, we see, floating about nationalism, freedom, and so on. So P.S. learned a lot from that. And when he came, he started the independence struggle also. He formed his party, the United Party. But Babukar, P.S. had an incident which really, embittered him so much that he just could not sit down and allow Gambia to be continued to be a British possession. Okay, because he lost his job.
Wow.
Simply because he shared the same girl with the British police commissioner, Commissioner Collins.
Whoa.
Commissioner Collins loved the girl that P.S. Njai wanted to marry. Because with all this colonial thing, I mean, the Europeans, they develop relationships, with these, women, with Gambian women. In fact, I have done some, quite a number of articles on that, you see. So, just because, the girl he wanted to marry has been taken away from him by the Commissioner of Police, in Banjul as Commissioner Collins, P.S. was further punished. He went to work, as, at the courts, like he was a clerk, and he found his dismissal letter. Before he knew, the next day, he was sent to Mile 2. He didn't know what was happening. Lost his job on a Monday, and on a Tuesday, he was taken to Mile 2. All because the, British, police commissioner in Batos, the head of the police, wanted to take the girl that he loved.
Interesting.
So by the time he extricated himself from this, legal, wranglings, they, trump up charges against him that, he stamped, somebody's, legal paper without permission, the usual, charges. So P.S. just packed his bags in 1943 and left the country to go to England to study law. You see. So that really, engendered a sense of nationalism into him, that oppression can only end if the Gambia becomes independent. Now, the third nationalist leader whom we must mention is Reverend J.C. Faye. He was an Anglican priest and a teacher. Okay. He had an incident which made him to dedicate his life to freeing the Gambia from colonial rule. I was a teacher at St. Mary's School. So one day, the inspector of schools, a European, came to visit the school, and he found, Reverend Faye at the school gate, standing with his hands in his pockets. Okay. So Mr. Smith, there was inspector of schools, came and told him that he should remove his hands from his pocket, because he's an African, and an African, when like an African sees a white man, he must not put his hands in his pocket, but must, be in obeisance. Reverend Faye said, "No, I will not remove my hands from my pocket." So Mr. Smith, slapped him, and Reverend J.C. Faye also slapped Mr. Smith. He was arrested. Okay, taken to Mile 2, for a night. But he had to be released in the middle of the night because the, people in Batos, wanted to storm the prison.
Oh.
To remove him from there. So when he came, he lost his job. And that also, engendered a fervent sense of nationalism, in him. Now, the third nationalist leader was Sadauda Kairaba Jawara. He trained in England. He went to England in 1946, to study veterinary science. Was an excellent student. Stayed on, to do, his doctorate, in veterinary science. But when he returned with all his qualifications, when he returned in 1956, he was told that he will not be promoted because he's an African. Instead, they brought a European with lesser qualification to be his boss.
Wow.
You see. So that also, pain, Sadauda a lot, because it, he was confronted with the nature of colonial rule. That as long as we are under colonial rule, there's no opportunity. That is why when people ask me, are we independent? I say, of course, we are independent, 100%. But I'm sure you are going to ask me that question later.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So Sadauda also had this, very, very, unpleasant experience. So what I'm saying this just to underscore the fact that all our founding fathers had their beef, if you like,
with the Europeans.
With the Europeans.
That
okay,
really,
and of course I've just summarized. I have not mentioned people like Alhaji Sheikh Omar Faye, because the role of religion
Yeah,
Gambia's independence struggle too is very, very important.
I was going to come to that, the role religion plays, because if you talk about Gabo Jahumpa and others, or the others, Francis Small, religion played a very key role, in sensitizing our public, who were not maybe vastly, educated in the European way, but we are vastly, educated in the
yes,
in
indeed,
religions, which is Christianity and Muslim.
Yeah, indeed. The press, like I said, on small scales, played a very, very pivotal role in the fight for independence. Another group is religious leaders. Like Mr. Faye, Reverend Faye was, of course, an Anglican priest. He had the Gambia Democratic Party. His party, didn't have any Christian agenda, so to speak. But if you look at the manifesto, Reverend Faye sounded like a Christian Democrat. What we today can call like a Christian Democrat, because he put the human being first. He said, develop the human being first. You see, so he had this humanistic approach to politics, which came about largely as a result of his training, as a pastor. You see, that you must be empathic and be sympathetic, to the plight of the small people, the less fortunate. And throughout his political career, he was a champion of the rural areas. He championed the cause of farmers. Now, I am Gaba Jahumpa from the Gambia Muslim Congress, in 1952. Okay, the party also did not have a covertly, Muslim agenda. But what Gaba Jahumpa wanted was to wake Muslims up from their political slumber, because for all along, politics in Banjul, like in Batos, had been left in the hands, of the Akus, who are mostly, Methodist or Anglican. So what Jahumpa wanted was also, to encourage, the young Muslims to take part in politics, to be interested in removing European rule, because he believed that now that, the Anglicans, and the Methodists, and of course the Catholics, are all politically conscious. If the Muslims also become politically conscious, then there can be like a united front, to tackle, colonial rule. So that's why, people, think that because it was called Muslim Congress, it was a party, which had
for Muslims,
Islamist agenda. No, it was just like a subterfuge to, really bring, Muslim, to raise the interest of Muslims in politics, which at the time was lacking. I just said Omar Faye also, he played a very, very leading role, using religion, sort of, to sanitize, Batos politics. Even before him, Al-Haji Usman Jeng. You see, all these are religious leaders, okay, who at the same time champion the political rights of Gambians. You see, such that religion really played a very, very important role in the Gambia's fight for independence, just like the press, did.
Then came 1965, when Azura elements on Sadauda and Koda were fortunate to make that era. Took up the baton and showered us into independence.
Yes.
From post-independence to pre-independence, rather to post-independence, since we gained independence, did we really achieve our dreams as a country that was yearning to end colonial rule?
Well, yes, because I think Gambians will be proud of the fact that our founding fathers, Sadauda, PS, Reverend Faye, Kewa Walifun, Hannah Foster, all of them, Edward Francis Small, they fought for our independence, guided by three cardinal principles. 1, constitutionalism. 2, peace and stability. 3, orderliness. These were, pivotal, benchmarks, which all our founding fathers paid great attention to, even as they were, struggling to free us from colonial rule. Now, what do I mean? Constitutionalism. They fought for independence through constitutional means. It was thanks to Small that we had the 1947 Constitution, which allowed for the first time for Gambians to elect their own representatives in the Legislative Council, now called National Assembly or Parliament or whatever we can call it. That was in 1947. It was small who really fought for that. Before that, the governor, will select anybody he likes, and appoint you to the Legislative Council. Small fought that until we had the 47 Constitution. Now, 4 years later, our political leaders, they fought for a new constitution, the 1951 Constitution, which allowed for the formation of political parties for the first time. Then Reverend Faye registered his party, Democratic Party, P.S. Njai registered his United Party, and Kaba Jompa registered, his Muslim Congress Party. Now, just 3 years later, we had another constitution in 1954, which allowed for the appointment of Gambian ministers. For the first time, ministers were appointed in 1954. P.S. Njai, whose life I have written in this book, was appointed, Minister of Education. Gaba Jahumpa was appointed Minister of Agriculture. Okay, and and Reverend Faye, was appointed Minister for Works. That was the 1954 Constitution. Now Gambians are called ministers for the first time.
In 54.
Then just 6 years later, we had the 1960 Constitution. You see, in which Gambians above the age of 21 could vote, whether you are in Koina or in Bakau. But all along these elections in 54, 51, only people in Batos, Bakau and Serekunda could vote. Okay. If you are in the villages, you had no franchise. But the 60 Constitution, brought us the franchise, universal adult suffrage. So you can see that, within a short period of 13 years, Gambia had almost, 6, new constitutions. So that's what I mean by, the constitutional nature of our rise to independence. And this should be a lesson to all of us, that this was a country which was forged out of constitutionalism. We did not riot, we did not, demonstrate, we did not protest to get our independence. Everything came through constitutional means, step-by-step constitutional means.
From 49 to 60.
Yeah, yeah. Now, number 2, I talk about peace. We had very peaceful nationalist leaders. It was never their intention to burn this country, just to get independence. Unlike what happened in Kenya, you had the Mau Mau revolt, for example. Our leaders, they did not like that. Okay? They had this cardinal point of having to deal with the British in a peaceful, manner, so as to get, the constitutional developments, which led us to independence. Now, number 3 is orderliness. Our march to independence was quite orderly. You see. For example, you had the constitutional talks, 1961 Lancaster House. All our political leaders went to London to discuss the 62 Constitution. They agreed. Dialogue, a consensus. That's what Gambians know. Dialogue, a consensus. 1964, Marlborough House talks. Our political leaders, went to Marlborough House in London. They all agreed on independence, and a date was fixed. In fact, the Marlborough House talks ended on the 22nd of July, 1964. And it was on this 22nd of July, 1964, that, Duncan Sandys, who was the British, Secretary of State for Colonies, looked at his, diary and said, okay, Gambia, I will give you independence on 18 February, 1965. Apparently, it was a bad day for, one of his daughters.
Oh.
That's Duncan Sandys. He was a powerful man. He was, the head of the colonial office. You see. So, you had the constitutional talks, which were also, part, of this very orderly, very systematic and very constitutional march to independence. But I have never seen in the archives a single moment when Gambians demonstrated or rioted for independence. No. Everything was done in peace, order, and calm. And I think that is something we have to thank our founding fathers for.
1965, we got our independence. Then came the famous 1970 Republican. How did that come about?
Well, yes, but I want us to stay a bit long on 65 because really, one thing we have to say about 65, nobody believed that the Gambia can exist for 3 months after independence. I have with me this famous book. I'm sure you have heard of it.
Enter Gambia.
You know, the book, you know, Barclay Rice. Yeah, I'm sure you have heard of this book.
Oh yes, The Birth of an Improbable Nation.
That's Barclay Rice.
Yeah.
Enter Gambia, The Birth of an Improbable Nation. He was here covering the independence celebrations. And he said, nobody believed. Like there were so many journalists who came here to cover the independence anniversary. You know, from Daily Express, from the Guardian of London, from the Times. And here I will read some of the very negative comments they made because they thought this country will collapse.
After attaining independence?
You know, by October 1965, there will be no Gambia. And maybe Senegal will just, you know, come and swallow us because the, you know, I mean, the state will collapse. Because they thought we could not survive as an independent country. For, you know, for example, the Manchester Guardian Weekly said, the Gambia ought never to have occurred.
Wow.
Yeah. The Gambia, okay, ought never to have occurred. That's, you know, like I'm like the Guardian of London.
Wow.
Now, like West Africa magazine wrote, the Gambia is the worst example of the carving up of Africa in which European powers have indulged. Okay? Now, the Daily Express of London also said, well, I want to call Gambia a land of hope. They became independent today, but hope they must have, because there is almost nothing here, such that if you try to float a company in the city of London with a prospectus based on what I see in the Gambia, you will get a visit from the fraud squad.
Wow.
Yeah. Now the Singapore daily newspaper called Malay Times wrote, in a more rational world, the Gambia would simply not exist as a separate independent country. So these were comments published on 19th February 1965 by the world press.
A day after
independence. Just to tell you, there was this aura of pessimism by outsiders that we cannot survive 6 months, there will be chaos, there will be no salaries, there will be food riots, and Senegal will just come and swallow us. So now I read your next question.
Interesting. Then we will definitely, I mean, Sadora and crew played a very good role in shaping the country from 65 coming forward. That took me to the 70 when we became a republic. Yes,
I mean, so how come we are celebrating 54 years? I think it's likely because we had astute, leader under Sadauda. Number one, the British trusted Sadauda. Yeah. He was not a hothead. He was not a fake revolutionary. He was not like jingoistic. He did not carry slogans in his head like so many African political leaders at the time. He did not ask for the Gambia to have an airline. He did not open embassies except in London and Dakar. Even the Dakar embassy was only opened in 1966 because Sadauda said, we'll cut our coat according to our size. Diplomatic missions are expensive to run. I cannot afford to bring down the economy of this new country by opening embassies left, right, and center. This is why we survive, cutting our coat according to our size. In 1965, our cabinet of 7 ministers, only Sadauda went to school. All the others, Sirif Diba, Sirif Sise, Amankani, Asan Musa Kamara, GLB Dafe, these were barely, high school dropouts. I'm saying this with much respect, to all of them. But they were barely, high school dropouts. The only Sadauda and Paul Balde, went to university. Yet, they were able to run this country efficiently until we did not collapse, as people expected. But in fact, we became champions in so many things: democracy, rule of law, tourism, and so on and so forth. So this is why, Babukar, maybe just before we end this discussion, we have the cause to celebrate our independence.
18 February.
Because we are free. We make decisions on our own, sovereign, independent decisions. Decisions are no longer being made in London, as used to happen in the past. That alone is enough to celebrate. Number two, we were given, independence has given us the opportunity to prove the world wrong, to prove the doubting Thomases wrong. That indeed, we have been given a chance, and we have worked so hard to not only make the Gambia a viable, independent country, but to make the Gambia a role model. And of course, we are a role model in so many things, you know that.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Due to time factor, let me just try to speed up here. Then came unfortunate 81.
Well, I mean, Sadauda, of course, he was a staunch Democrat. Even his entourage. Anybody who sounded totalitarian, you parted the ways with Sadauda. Number one. Number two, he was a unifier. He unified the colony and the protectorate. At independence, this country was a divided country. This is something that people should know. If you are from the villages, if you died in battles, they will not bury you there. You will cross the river, with your corpse. Because there was this protectorate colony divide, very antagonistic, because of the colonial tactic of divide and rule. Thanks to our founding fathers, this, divide, was breached, because he opened the PPP to everybody. Of course, at the beginning, it thought, the detractors thought the party was a Mandinka party and so on, which was not true. And Sadauda cemented the fact that the PPP was a truly national party.
What does history tell us about the 81 coup?
Well, the 81 coup destroyed our innocence. From 65 to 81, Gambia was on 3 occasions voted the most peaceful, the most democratic country in the world by listeners to the BBC World Service. Then came 81. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Kokoye and his rebels attacked. They wanted to overthrow Sadauda's government. In fact, they did overthrow it, at least for 3 days. July 30, 31, and August 1st at least. Because Sadauda was, he was in exile in Dakar. But what 81 really did was to shatter our innocence. Yeah, 81 shattered our innocence. Before 81, we were a peaceable, friendly, unassuming, democratic, country.
The real smiling coast.
Yeah, and the rebels came.
Wow.
1,000 people died, within the week. 1,000 Gambians. Rape everywhere. This you can get from the Amnesty International reports of 1982. Over $100 million of those days worth of materials were looted. The shops were all looted in Serekunda, in Banjul, in the rural areas. This country almost came to her knees. But we survived 81 also thanks to our adherence to democracy and the rule of law. How? Because after 81, Sadauda said there will be no vengeance.
Okay.
People wanted him to go to Guinea-Bissau, extradite Kokoye, who was hiding there, with his, gang of rebels, and, bring them to Mile 2 and hang them at the gallows. Sadauda said no. The rebels were arrested and their civilian accomplices some people thought that they should just be shot or hung. Summary justice. Sadawda said no. He brought, judges from Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria. In mixed court.
Okay.
Which now the ICC is doing, the International Criminal Court. They learned it from Gambia. And people were given free and fair trial. People were sentenced to death, but nobody was executed, except one fellow. And in fact, by 10 years, they had all been amnested, out of prison. That's how he was able to reconcile the Gambia, despite the mass murder, which happened on 30th July 1981. And also we survived 81 because of our democratic credentials. When countries outside the Gambia heard of the rebel attack, they were rushing to come to our aid.
To support.
Billions of dollars entered the Gambia. The Japanese, gave us vehicles. The British gave us, generators. The Germans, the Nigerians, the Senegalese government. Everybody came to our aid, such that we could not, our civil service at the time could not even handle the foreign aid that was coming in the Gambia after 1981. You see, so that's how we were able to rise up. So in conclusion, Babukar, I think two things have saved the Gambia and can continue to save the Gambia. One, democracy and the rule of law. We must all work to maintain it as our founding fathers have started. Number two, dialogue and consultation. We are not a country born out of riots or out of protests or demonstration. Like in 32 years in power, Sadara never organized a demonstration. So we don't know it.
Sure.
What we know is dialogue and consensus building. And I think that's the way forward.
Thank you very much. Hassan Sise, a Gambian historian, a writer, and of course one time curator at the National Museum, now working with the National Center for Arts and Culture. Well, I've learned a lot. I hope you did. That's all we have time for today's edition of the Viewpoint. Do join me next week, the same time, and of course, the same place, QTV, Gambia at 54 on the 18th of February 2019. Thanks for watching. Bye.